The common rule requires IRBs to establish and follow written procedures to ensure prompt reporting to the Office for Human Research Protections, OHRP, of any serious or continuing noncompliance and of any suspension or termination of IRB approval. This tutorial explains these requirements. Please review a separate tutorial that explains the reporting requirements for unanticipated problems involving risks to subjects or others. To report incidents to other common rule agencies, investigators and IRBs should seek advice from the respective funding agency directly. Some research studies are short and simple to conduct, while others may take years to conduct and require complex management. Non-compliance with the common rule can occur in any research study, or even at the institutional or IRB level. Institutions do not need to report all instances of non-compliance to OHRP. For HHS-funded non-exempt human subjects research, they only need to report non-compliance that is considered serious or continuing noncompliance. IRBs should describe in their written procedures the types of incidents they would consider to be serious or continuing noncompliance. Even in cases where reporting to OHRP may not be required, institutions should consider how the noncompliance should be addressed and what steps should be taken to prevent it in the future. Sometimes, in the conduct of research, investigators might deviate from the study parameters approved by the IRB for their protocol. Some of these deviations are actions taken by the investigators, while others may be the result of circumstances outside of their control. While study deviations are technically noncompliance, not all deviations constitute serious noncompliance that must be reported to OHRP. Generally, serious noncompliance includes things like conducting non-exempt human subjects research without IRB review and approval, or without appropriate informed consent. Implementing changes to IRB-approved research without IRB approval could be considered serious noncompliance, depending on the nature of the changes. Necessary changes made to eliminate apparent immediate hazards to the subject are not noncompliance. When an institution or IRB determines an incident to be serious noncompliance, it must also be reported to OHRP. Serious noncompliance can also occur in IRB-related activities. These must be reported to OHRP as well. Examples of serious IRB noncompliance may include approving research at a convened meeting without satisfying the quorum requirements, or using the expedited review mechanism to approve research that does not satisfy the conditions for expedited review. The most common serious incidents of noncompliance reported to OHRP involve changes to research without IRB review and approval that were not made to prevent an immediate hazard to subjects, and failure to obtain informed consent from research subjects. The common rule also requires reporting continuing noncompliance to OHRP. Continuing noncompliance is generally understood to mean repeated or recurrent noncompliance, even if it is not serious, particularly after the IRB has informed the responsible party of the issue. For example, if an investigator repeatedly fails to submit a research protocol for continuing review before its approval expires, the IRB may find this behavior as meeting the threshold for continuing noncompliance and report it to OHRP. Continuing noncompliance could also take place at the IRB level. For example, if an IRB repeatedly fails to document information about quorum or voting in the meeting minutes. The most common incidents of continuing noncompliance reported to OHRP are failure to document subjects' informed consent, failure to use the most current IRB-approved consent document, and failure to follow the IRB-approved protocol. Many of these are revealed through audits of research and involve multiple incidences of noncompliance. In addition to unanticipated problems and serious or continuing noncompliance, the common rule requires reporting to OHRP instances when an IRB suspends or terminates approval for a study. When an investigator voluntarily stops their research, the investigator may have obligations to report such an occurrence to the IRB, the sponsor, or others. In these circumstances, however, there is no requirement to report to OHRP. Similarly, there is no requirement to report to OHRP when an institution, and not the IRB, suspends or terminates a research study. For example, many institutions suspended some of their human subjects research at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic to reduce the risk of infection and avoid straining the healthcare systems. These suspensions did not require reporting to OHRP because the decisions to suspend the research did not come from the IRB. On the other hand, some IRBs took actions to suspend certain studies during the pandemic. These IRB suspensions had to be reported to OHRP. Note that an IRB suspension or termination of only a part of a study, as opposed to the full study, still needs to be reported to OHRP. For example, an IRB might require that new enrollment be halted pending resolution of certain safety issues, but allow enrolled subjects to continue other study activities not affected by the safety issues. The IRB action of suspending enrollment is reportable to OHRP. Finally, it is not considered a suspension or termination of IRB approval that requires reporting to OHRP when research activities have to be halted because the IRB approval of a study expires automatically at the end of its approval period. However, if investigators repeatedly fail to obtain IRB approval before the study expiration, the institution or IRB may determine that this is continuing noncompliance that must be reported to OHRP. Also, in some cases, an institution or IRB may determine that the expiration of IRB approval for a study resulted in serious noncompliance, making it reportable to OHRP. For example, if an investigator deliberately neglected the expiration date and continued all research activities for several months before submitting for continuing review and approval. All reportable incidents, including unanticipated problems, serious or continuing noncompliance, and suspensions or terminations of IRB approval, must be reported to OHRP promptly. The nature of the incident and the circumstances in which it occurred may affect what would reasonably be considered prompt reporting. For incidents posing significant risk to research subjects, reporting to OHRP should occur within a few days. For less severe incidents, reporting within a few weeks may be sufficient. IRBs should have written policies that indicate which official should send reports to OHRP. For more information, visit OHRP's Compliance and Reporting webpage at www.hhs.gov/OHRP/compliance-and-reporting/index.html.